The moment Zachary Atwood rode into Bentonville, Arkansas in the scorching summer of 1878, he knew his wandering days were numbered, though he did not yet know it would be a woman with fire in her eyes and dirt under her fingernails who would finally anchor him to one place forever. He had been drifting from town to town for the better part of 3 years, working cattle drives and odd ranch jobs, never staying long enough to put down roots or make promises he could not keep. The dusty main street stretched before him, lined with weathered storefronts and false-fronted buildings that leaned slightly from years of wind and rain. His horse, a sturdy roan mare named Bess, picked her way carefully around the wagon ruts baked hard into the earth. Zachary was 24 years old, tall and lean from years of hard work, with sun-darkened skin and dark hair that fell to his collar beneath his wide-brimmed hat. His eyes were a clear hazel that seemed to change color depending on the light, and his face bore the kind of quiet strength that came from facing hardship without complaint. He had grown up on a small ranch in Texas, the youngest of 4 sons, and when his parents passed within a year of each other, he had left his brothers to their inheritance and struck out on his own. The town was larger than he had expected, with a proper general store, a bank, 2 saloons, a church with a white steeple, and what looked like a newspaper office. People moved about their business despite the heat, women in bonnets carrying baskets, men loading wagons or standing in clusters talking. He guided Bess toward the livery stable at the far end of town, his saddle creaking with the familiar rhythm that had become the soundtrack of his life. The livery was run by an older man with a gray beard who introduced himself as Martin Cross. After settling Bess into a clean stall with fresh hay and water, Zachary asked about work in the area. "Depends on what kind of work you are looking for," Martin said, leaning against a post and studying Zachary with shrewd blue eyes. "You look like a cowhand." "I have worked cattle most of my life," Zachary confirmed. "Ranch work, trail drives, breaking horses, whatever needs doing." Martin nodded slowly. "There is a widow woman about 2 miles outside of town, runs a spread by herself with her 2 children. Been struggling since her husband died last winter. Name is Zara Lawson. She could probably use the help, though I do not know if she has the money to pay much." Something in the way Martin said it, with a mixture of respect and concern, caught Zachary's attention. "I will ride out and talk to her. Which direction?" Martin gave him detailed directions to a property northwest of town, bordered by a creek on one side and a line of cottonwood trees on the other. Zachary thanked him, made sure Bess was settled, and decided to walk to the boarding house Martin had recommended to get a room before riding out in the morning. The boarding house was run by a cheerful woman named Mrs. Patterson, who showed him to a small but clean room on the 2nd floor. He paid for a week in advance, washed the trail dust from his face and hands in the basin provided, and went downstairs to the dining room where she served supper to her boarders. There were 5 others staying there, including a traveling salesman, a young couple passing through on their way to family in Kansas, and 2 railroad workers. The conversation flowed easily around the table, and Zachary learned more about Bentonville and the surrounding area. The town had been established in the early 1870s and was growing steadily, benefiting from its location on several trade routes. The land was good for farming and ranching, with rolling hills covered in oak and hickory forests, open prairies perfect for grazing, and plenty of water from creeks and springs. The people seemed friendly and hardworking, the kind of community that looked after its own. That night, lying in an actual bed for the first time in weeks, Zachary found himself thinking about the widow Lawson. He wondered what kind of woman would try to run a ranch alone with only children to help her. Most widows he had known either remarried quickly for practicality or sold their land and moved in with family. There had to be either desperation or determination driving her, perhaps both. He rose early the next morning, ate a hearty breakfast of eggs, bacon, and biscuits that Mrs. Patterson served with strong coffee, and headed to the livery to collect Bess. The morning air was already warm, promising another hot day. He rode out of town following Martin's directions, watching the landscape change from the clustered buildings to scattered homesteads and then to open country. The Lawson Ranch, when he found it, was smaller than he had expected but well situated. A modest house sat on a slight rise, built of logs with a stone chimney at one end. A barn that had seen better days stood nearby, along with a chicken coop, a small corral, and what looked like a vegetable garden behind the house. He could see cattle grazing in the distance, maybe 20 or 30 head, and a few horses in the corral. As he rode up the worn path toward the house, he noticed details that spoke of hard work and harder times. The fence around the garden needed mending, several boards on the barn were loose or missing, and the whole place had an air of exhaustion, as though it was holding itself together through sheer stubbornness. Before he reached the house, a woman emerged from the barn carrying a bucket that seemed too heavy for her. She set it down when she saw him approaching, and even from a distance, Zachary could see her stiffen, her hand moving to her side where he guessed she had a weapon tucked into her belt. He stopped Bess a respectful distance away and called out, "Morning, madam. Martin Cross at the livery told me you might be looking for help. Name is Zachary Atwood." The woman studied him for a long moment before responding. She was younger than he had expected, probably in her mid-20s, with auburn hair pulled back in a braid that fell past her shoulders. Even in the simple work dress she wore, dusty and stained from labor, she was beautiful in a way that had nothing to do with fancy clothes or careful grooming. Her face was sun-kissed, with high cheekbones and a firm jaw that suggested determination. But it was her eyes that caught him, a deep green that looked at him with a mixture of wariness and desperate hope. "I am Zara Lawson," she said, her voice clear and strong despite the obvious fatigue in her posture. "I could use help, but I cannot pay much. Room and board and what little cash I can spare when I sell cattle in the fall." Zachary dismounted slowly, keeping his movements easy and non-threatening. "Room and board would suit me fine for now, madam. I have done most kinds of ranch work. You can tell me what needs doing, and I will do it." She continued to study him with those sharp green eyes, and he had the feeling she was taking his measure in a way that went beyond his physical capabilities. Finally, she nodded. "The barn needs repairs before winter. Fences need mending. I've got cattle scattered across 300 acres that need gathering and the brand checked. The well pump is acting up. Garden needs weeding. And I've got 2 children who need watching when I am working." "I can handle all of that except the children," Zachary said honestly. "I do not know much about young ones." For the first time, something that might have been amusement flickered across her face. "They mostly look after themselves. My son Thomas is 8 and my daughter Emma is 6. They are good children, but they need a steady hand sometimes." Before Zachary could respond, 2 children came running around the corner of the house, clearly having been watching from somewhere out of sight. The boy was tall for his age, with dark hair like his mother's and serious brown eyes. The girl was smaller, with lighter brown hair in 2 braids and a face full of freckles. "Mama, who is that?" the girl asked, stopping a few feet behind her mother and staring at Zachary with open curiosity. "This is Mr. Atwood," Zara said. "He is going to help us with the ranch work." "Are you a real cowboy?" Thomas asked, his eyes going to the worn leather chaps Zachary wore and the rope coiled on his saddle. I have worked cattle most of my life, Zachary said, crouching down to be more on their level. So I suppose that makes me a cowboy. Can you rope? Thomas pressed. Thomas, enough questions, Zara said firmly. Mr. Atwood has work to do, and so do you. Those chickens need feeding, and Emma, the eggs need collecting. The children ran off to their chores, though Zachary noticed Thomas kept looking back over his shoulder. He straightened and looked at Zara. When do you want me to start? Now, if you are willing, she said. I will show you where you can put your horse and where you will sleep. It is just a small room off the barn, nothing fancy. I have slept in worse places, Zachary assured her. She led him to the barn, and he saw immediately what she meant about repairs. The roof had several places where daylight showed through, and the whole structure listed slightly to one side. Inside, it was dim and dusty but organized with a few stalls, a tack room, and a ladder leading to a loft. She showed him a small room that had been built into one corner, probably originally meant for storing feed or equipment. It had a narrow cot, a small table, and a chair. A single window looked out toward the house. It is not much, Zara said, and for the first time he heard uncertainty in her voice. It is fine, he said firmly. Better than sleeping on the ground. She nodded and seemed to relax slightly. I will bring you blankets and such. Meals are at sunrise, noon, and sundown. I expect honest work for what I am paying, even if it is not much. You will get honest work, Zachary promised. Over the next few weeks, Zachary settled into the rhythm of the ranch. He rose before dawn and worked until dark, tackling the most urgent repairs first. The barn roof took 3 days to fix properly, requiring him to ride into town for supplies that Zara carefully counted out money for, her face tight with worry over every dollar spent. He mended fences, fixed the well pump, and began the slow process of gathering the scattered cattle. Thomas often followed him around when not doing his own chores, full of questions about everything from how to throw a rope to where Zachary had traveled. Emma was shyer, but would sometimes bring him water or biscuits wrapped in a cloth, her small face serious as she handed them over. Zara worked harder than any woman he had ever seen. She was up before him every morning, already cooking breakfast when he came to the house. She worked in the garden, tended the chickens, did laundry, cooked, cleaned, and still found time to help with ranch work when she could. She moved cattle with a skill that spoke of years of experience, sat a horse like she was born to it, and could rope nearly as well as he could. But he saw the exhaustion in her face, the way her hands shook sometimes when she thought no one was looking, the thinness of her frame that spoke of too many meals skipped so her children could eat. She never complained, never asked for help with her own tasks, and maintained a wall of polite distance between them that he did not try to breach. One evening about a month after he had arrived, he was working in the corral, training a young horse that Zara hoped to sell. Thomas sat on the fence watching, and Emma played in the dirt nearby with a collection of small stones she was arranging into patterns. "Mr. Atwood, can I ask you something?" Thomas said suddenly. "You can ask," Zachary said, keeping his attention on the horse while he worked a rope around its neck. "Are you going to leave like the other men?" Zachary paused and looked up at the boy. "What other men?" "After Pa died, Mama hired 2 different men to help. They both left after a few weeks. One said the work was too hard for what she could pay. The other one tried to get Mama to marry him, and when she said no, he got mad and left." Zachary felt a flash of anger at the man who had tried to take advantage of Zara's difficult situation. "I am not going anywhere," he said firmly. "I gave my word I would help, and I keep my word. Promise." Emma piped up from where she was playing. He looked at the little girl with her earnest face and felt something shift in his chest. "I promise." From the house, Zara called that supper was ready. As they walked toward the house together, Zachary caught her watching them from the doorway, an expression on her face he could not quite read. Supper that night was stew made from a rabbit Thomas had snared and vegetables from the garden. It was simple but good, and they ate at the worn wooden table in the main room of the house. Zachary had been invited to eat with the family from the beginning, though the first few meals had been awkward and quiet. Over time, the children had started chattering, and even Zara had begun to relax slightly. "Mr. Atwood promised he is not going to leave," Emma announced as she carefully spooned stew into her mouth. Zara's eyes shot to Zachary's face, and he saw a flash of something vulnerable there before she looked away. "Emma, do not pester Mr. Atwood." "It is not pestering," Zachary said quietly. "I told them the truth. I am not going anywhere." "People's circumstances change," Zara said, her voice carefully neutral. "You should not make promises you might not be able to keep." "I do not make promises I cannot keep," Zachary said, holding her gaze until she looked away first. Later, as he was washing up at the pump outside, Zara came out to draw water for the morning. The sun had set, and the sky was deepening to purple, the first stars beginning to appear. "You should not have promised them that," she said without preamble. "Why not?" "Because you will leave eventually. Men like you always do. You will get bored or find better work or just decide to move on. And when you do, those children will be heartbroken again." "Men like me," Zachary repeated, hearing the edge in his own voice. "What kind of man do you think I am, Mrs. Lawson?" She set the bucket down with more force than necessary. "I think you are a drifter, a man who has spent years moving from place to place, never settling down, never putting down roots. I do not blame you for it, but I also will not let my children get attached to someone who is going to disappear from their lives." "Maybe I was a drifter," Zachary said, "but people can change. Maybe I found something worth staying for." She stared at him, and in the dim light, he could see the war going on behind her eyes, between hope and fear, between wanting to believe him and protecting herself and her children from more pain. "Do not say things like that," she whispered finally. "Why not?" "Because I cannot afford to believe them." She picked up her bucket and walked back into the house, leaving Zachary standing in the gathering darkness, feeling like he had just crossed some invisible line. As summer deepened into early August, the work continued. Zachary repaired the corral, built a new chicken coop when the old one collapsed in a storm, and helped Zara bring in the vegetable harvest to preserve for winter. He was teaching Thomas to rope, and the boy was showing real promise, his face lighting up with pride whenever he managed to catch the post they had been practicing on. Emma had taken to following Zachary around more, chattering about everything and nothing. She showed him her collection of interesting rocks, the bird's nest she had found, and the kittens born in the barn. He found himself looking forward to her small visits, the way she trusted him completely and without reservation. And Zara, despite her walls and her warnings, was warming to him. He caught her watching him sometimes when she thought he did not notice, a softness in her face that had not been there before. They talked more during meals, sharing stories of their lives, though Zara was still guarded about certain things. One sweltering afternoon in mid-August, they were moving cattle from one pasture to another. It was just the two of them, as the children were at a neighbor's house for the day. Working cattle together required a kind of unspoken communication, an awareness of what the other person was doing and anticipating their moves. Zachary had worked with many cowhands over the years, but rarely had he found someone who matched his rhythm as naturally as Zara did. They had just finished getting the last of the cattle through the gate when Zara's horse, spooked by a snake, reared suddenly. Zara, already tired from hours of work in the heat, lost her seat and fell hard. Zachary was off his horse and at her side in seconds. She was conscious but gasping for breath, the wind knocked out of her. He helped her sit up carefully, checking for injuries while her horse trotted away a short distance. "Just give yourself a minute," he said, his hand on her back, feeling the rapid rise and fall as she struggled to breathe. "You are all right, just had the wind knocked out." After a few moments, her breathing eased and color started returning to her face. She looked up at him, and he realized how close they were, his arm still around her shoulders, her hand gripping his sleeve. "Thank you," she said, her voice still breathless but for a different reason now. "Zara," he said, using her first name for the first time, "I need to tell you something." She did not pull away, though he felt her tense. "What?" "I am falling in love with you." She closed her eyes and he saw a tear slide down her cheek. "Please do not." "Too late," he said softly. "Has been for weeks now. I know this is not the time or the place, and I know you are not ready to hear it, but I had to say it. I am done drifting, Zara. This is where I want to be. With you and Thomas and Emma, if you will have me." "You do not know what you are asking," she whispered. "You do not know what my life has been like." "Then tell me." She opened her eyes and looked at him, and he saw years of pain there. "My husband, James, he was a good man. We met when I was 18, married at 19. He worked hard, loved his children, and built this ranch from nothing. But last winter, there was a fever that went through town. He caught it trying to help a neighbor family. He died 3 days later, right there in our bed, and there was nothing I could do to save him." "I am sorry," Zachary said, meaning it. "After he died, I thought about selling the ranch, moving back east to my sister. But this was James's dream. He wanted to build something to pass on to Thomas, something that would last. So I decided to keep it going, to honor his memory. But it has been so hard. Every day is a struggle to keep food on the table, to keep the ranch running, to be both mother and father to my children." "You do not have to do it alone anymore," Zachary said. "Do not, you see? That is what scares me. What if I let myself depend on you? What if my children come to see you as a father, and then you leave and I have to pick up the pieces again? I will not leave. You cannot promise that." "No one can promise that." "I can, and I do. Zara, I have been running from something my whole adult life, though I did not really understand what until I came here. I was running from the kind of life my parents had, the kind of settled, ordinary existence that seemed like giving up on adventure. But what I found instead was empty. Moving from town to town, never having anything or anyone that mattered, never building anything that lasted. I was lonely, even when I was surrounded by people." He paused, making sure she was listening. "The first time I saw you, standing there by the barn, exhausted and weary but still standing, still fighting, I felt something shift. And every day since, that feeling has grown. It is not just that I am attracted to you, though God knows I am. It is that I admire you. Your strength, your determination, the way you love your children, the way you honor your husband's memory by refusing to give up on his dream. You make me want to be a better man. You make me want to build something that lasts." Zara was crying openly now, and he reached up to gently wipe the tears from her face. "I love James," she said. "I need you to know that. I know. And I would never ask you to forget him or stop loving him. He was your husband, the father of your children. He deserves to be remembered and honored. But sometimes, lately, when I look at you, I feel guilty because I am starting to have feelings I thought I would never have again. And it has only been 8 months since he died, and what kind of woman does that make me?" "It makes you human," Zachary said firmly. "Zara, love is not a finite resource. The fact that you loved your husband does not mean you cannot love again, and honoring his memory does not mean you have to spend the rest of your life alone." She searched his face for a long moment, then slowly, tentatively, leaned her forehead against his shoulder. He held her carefully like something precious that might break. "I am scared," she whispered. "I know. But I promise you I will not hurt you, I will not leave. I will be here for you and for Thomas and Emma, for as long as you will have me." They stayed like that for a while, holding each other in the late afternoon heat, with the cattle grazing nearby and the Arkansas sky stretching endlessly above them. Finally, Zara pulled back and looked at him. "I am not ready to say I love you yet," she said, "but I think I could be given time. I can wait," Zachary said. "I am not going anywhere." They rode back to the ranch together, and though nothing outwardly had changed, everything felt different. That evening, when Thomas asked Zachary to show him a new rope trick after supper, Zara did not protest. And when Emma climbed into Zachary's lap while he was sitting on the porch watching the sunset, Zara only smiled. The next few weeks brought a shift in the household. Zara still maintained some distance, still sometimes retreated behind her walls when things felt too intimate, but she was opening up slowly. They talked more, shared more, laughed together over the children's antics. Thomas had started calling him Zach instead of Mr. Atwood, and Emma had taken to holding his hand whenever they walked anywhere together. One evening in early September, after the children were asleep, Zara asked Zachary to stay and talk after supper. They sat on the porch together, the night air finally cooling after another hot day. "I need to tell you something," Zara said, her voice serious. Zachary felt a flutter of anxiety. "All right. When James was dying, when we both knew there was no hope, he made me promise him something. He made me promise that I would not give up on living just because he was gone. He said he wanted me to find happiness again, to find someone to help me raise our children and run the ranch. He said he could not bear the thought of me spending the rest of my life alone, grieving for him." She paused, her hands twisted together in her lap. "At the time, I promised because it seemed to give him peace, but I never really thought I would be able to keep that promise. I thought I would always be too broken, too lost in grief to ever open my heart again. And now?" Zachary asked quietly. "Now I think maybe James knew me better than I knew myself. He knew that I am not the kind of person who can live half a life, that I would need someone to lean on, someone to share the burden with, someone to love." She turned to look at him, and in the moonlight her eyes were bright. "I think he would have liked you, Zachary. I think he would have approved." Zachary reached over and took her hand, their fingers intertwining naturally. "I would have liked to have known him." Any man who could inspire such loyalty and love must have been exceptional. "He was," Zara said softly, "but he is gone and you are here, and I am tired of fighting what I feel." "What do you feel?" Zachary asked, hardly daring to breathe. "I feel like maybe, just maybe, I am falling in love with you too." The kiss, when it came, was gentle and sweet, full of promise and hope and the possibility of new beginnings. They stayed on the porch long into the night, talking and kissing and making plans for a future that was starting to feel real. The next morning they told the children together. Thomas, with the seriousness of an old soul in a young body, looked at Zachary and said, "Are you going to be our new pa?" Zachary glanced at Zara, who nodded slightly. "If that is all right with you," he said. Thomas considered this carefully. "Will you teach me everything you know about being a cowboy?" "Everything," Zachary promised. "Then it is all right with me." Emma, more straightforward in her affections, simply launched herself at Zachary with a cry of delight. "I knew you would stay. I knew it." They decided to wait a full year after James's death before marrying, out of respect for his memory and to give the community time to accept the relationship. It was a long engagement, but neither minded. They were building something together, something that needed a strong foundation. During that time, Zachary proved himself over and over. When a group of cattle rustlers tried to make off with some of their herd one night in October, he tracked them down, and with the help of the sheriff and several neighbors, recovered the stolen cattle. When Thomas broke his arm falling from a tree in November, Zachary sat with him through the painful setting of the bone, holding the boy's hand and telling him stories to distract him from the pain. When Emma had nightmares about losing another parent in December, it was Zachary who walked the floor with her until she fell back asleep, humming songs his own mother had sung to him. And through it all, he worked tirelessly on the ranch, making improvements, building a future. In January, on the first anniversary of James's death, they held a small memorial at his grave in the town cemetery. Zara cried, and so did the children, and Zachary stood with his arms around all of them, letting them grieve and knowing that grief and love could coexist. That night, Zara came to him in the barn where he was bedding down the horses. "Thank you," she said, "for understanding that I needed to mourn him today." "He was your husband," Zachary said. "He will always be a part of your life, a part of your children's lives." "I do not want to replace him, Zara. I just want to build something new alongside his memory." She kissed him then, with a passion and commitment that left no doubt about her feelings. "I love you, Zachary Atwood. I love you completely and without reservation." "I love you too," he said. "More than I ever thought possible." They were married on a warm day in late March 1879, in the church in Bentonville with most of the town in attendance. Thomas stood beside Zachary as his best man, serious and proud in his first suit. Emma was the flower girl, scattering petals with great concentration and delight. Martin Cross gave Zara away, having become a good friend to the family over the months. Zara wore a simple blue dress that brought out her eyes, her auburn hair arranged in soft curls. She was so beautiful that Zachary felt his throat tighten when he saw her walking down the aisle. When they spoke their vows, promising to love and honor each other for the rest of their lives, there was not a dry eye in the church. At the reception held at the boarding house, Mrs. Patterson having insisted on hosting and cooking, Thomas pulled Zachary aside. "I need to ask you something," the boy said, his face serious. "Anything," Zachary said. "My pa, before he died, he made me promise to take care of Mama and Emma, to be the man of the house. But now you are here, and I do not know if I am supposed to keep that promise or if it is your job now." Zachary crouched down to be eye level with the boy. "Thomas, your father gave you that responsibility because he trusted you, and you have done an incredible job. You have been brave and strong and helpful, but being the man of the house should not fall on the shoulders of an 8-year-old boy. That is not fair to you." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "What if we shared the responsibility? I will take care of the heavy work, the providing, the protecting, but you can still help take care of your mama and your sister in the ways that matter. Being kind, being thoughtful, helping out around the house. You will still honor your promise to your pa, but you will also get to be a boy again. To play and learn and grow up without so much weight on your shoulders." Thomas thought about this for a moment, then nodded. "That sounds all right, but I still want to learn everything about ranching and being a cowboy. And I will teach you," Zachary promised. "Everything I know." The boy threw his arms around Zachary's neck in a sudden, fierce hug. "I am glad you married Mama. I am glad you are staying." Zachary hugged him back, feeling a surge of love for this serious, brave boy. "Me too, son, me too." The word son had slipped out naturally, and Thomas pulled back to look at him with wide eyes. "Can I call you Pa?" Zachary felt his eyes sting with tears. "I would be honored if you did." Emma, not wanting to be left out, ran over and demanded her own hug and the right to call him Pa as well. Zachary gathered both children into his arms, and when he looked up, He saw Zara watching them with tears streaming down her face and the most beautiful smile he had ever seen. Their wedding night was spent at the ranch, the children staying with Mrs. Patterson in town so the newlyweds could have privacy. Zachary carried Zara over the threshold of the house that was now legally theirs together, and they made love with a tenderness and passion that spoke of deep love and commitment. Afterward, lying in bed with Zara's head on his chest and her hair spread across his shoulder, Zachary felt a peace he had never known before. This was what he had been searching for all those years of drifting. Not adventure or excitement or freedom from responsibility, but this, a home, a family, someone to love and be loved by. "What are you thinking?" Zara asked sleepily. "That I am the luckiest man alive," he said honestly. She tilted her head to smile at him. "I am pretty lucky too. I never thought I would feel this way again. Happy, hopeful, loved." "You are loved," he said fiercely. "By me, by your children, by this whole community. You deserve every bit of happiness, Zara." She kissed him again, and they made love once more, slower this time, learning each other's bodies and hearts with patience and care. The next months were some of the happiest of Zachary's life. He threw himself into improving the ranch, using some of his savings from years of work to buy more cattle and better equipment. The herd grew, the ranch prospered, and the family flourished. Thomas was growing like a weed, shooting up so fast that they had to buy him new clothes every few months. He was becoming an excellent horseman and could rope almost as well as Zachary now. He had also started helping more with the heavy work, his thin frame filling out with muscle. Emma remained a bright, cheerful presence, chattering constantly and filling the house with laughter. She had taken over more of the chicken tending duties and had started a small garden of her own where she grew flowers to put in jars around the house. Zara bloomed under the security and love of their marriage. She smiled more, laughed easier, and the constant worry lines on her forehead had smoothed out. She and Zachary worked together seamlessly, partners in every sense of the word. They made decisions together, solved problems together, and built their future together. In June, on a particularly hot afternoon, they were all working together to build a new addition onto the barn. Thomas and Emma were helping by hauling boards and bringing water, while Zachary and Zara did the actual construction. Emma had just brought fresh water from the well when a group of riders approached the ranch. Zachary recognized the lead rider as Raymond Hutchins, a rancher from the other side of the county who had a reputation for being ruthless in business and unkind to his workers. He had several men with him, all armed. "Atwood," Hutchins said, not bothering with pleasantries. "I am here to make you an offer on this land." "The land is not for sale," Zachary said calmly, though he felt Zara tense beside him. "Everything is for sale at the right price," Hutchins said. "I am expanding my operation, and this property sits right where I need it. I am prepared to offer you a fair price." "I said it is not for sale," Zachary repeated. Hutchins's face darkened. "Do not be a fool. You are sitting on a small spread with barely enough cattle to make it through winter. I am offering you a chance to walk away with money in your pocket." "This is our home," Zara spoke up, her voice strong despite the fear Zachary could see in her eyes. "My husband built it, and we are raising our children here. We are not interested in selling." "Your late husband was a stubborn fool too," Hutchins said cruelly. "Look where it got him, dead in the ground, and you nearly lost everything." Zachary felt rage boil up inside him, but before he could speak, Thomas stepped forward, his young face set in determined lines. "You do not get to talk about my father that way," the boy said, his voice shaking but clear. "He was a good man, and he built something worth keeping. And my new pa is just as good a man, and he is going to keep building what my first pa started, so you need to leave our land right now." Hutchins looked at Thomas with disdain, but something in the boy's courage seemed to give him pause. He looked back at Zachary. The boy has spirit, I will give him that, but spirit does not pay bills. My offer stands for 1 week. After that, I will find other ways to get what I want. The threat was clear, but Zachary refused to be intimidated. You heard my son. You need to leave our land. Hutchins stared at him for a long moment, then wheeled his horse around and rode off with his men following. As soon as they were out of sight, Zara let out a breath she had been holding. What are we going to do? She asked. We are going to do what we have always done, Zachary said firmly. Work hard, stand our ground, and protect what is ours. That night, after the children were in bed, Zachary and Zara talked seriously about the situation. Hutchins was known for being vindictive, and his threat about finding other ways to get what he wanted could mean anything from trying to buy out their debts to outright sabotage. Maybe we should consider selling, Zara said quietly, if it means keeping you and the children safe. No, Zachary said firmly. This land represents everything your first husband dreamed of, everything we have built together. We are not going to let a bully steal that from us. But what if he tries to hurt us? Then we will be ready. I will talk to the sheriff tomorrow, let him know what is going on. We will also talk to the neighbors, make sure they know to watch out for any of Hutchins's men on our land, and we will be careful and vigilant. Zara looked at him with worry in her eyes. When I married you, I gained a partner. But I also gained someone else to worry about losing. Zachary pulled her into his arms. You are not going to lose me. I made you a promise on our wedding day, and I make it again now. I am not going anywhere. Not because of Hutchins, not because of hard times, not because of anything. I am here, with you and our children, for the rest of my life. She held him tightly, and he felt her fear and her trust warring within her. The next morning, Zachary rode into town and spoke with Sheriff Porter, a fair man who had been doing the job for 5 years. Porter listened to Zachary's story with a grim expression. Hutchins has been trying to expand his holdings for a while now, the sheriff said. He has bought out several smaller ranchers, usually by making their lives difficult until they had no choice but to sell. Legal harassment mostly, nothing I could arrest him for. What can we do? Keep careful records of everything. If his men trespass on your land, report it immediately. If you notice any suspicious activity, cattle missing, fences cut, anything like that, report it. Build a case so if he does try something more serious, I will have grounds to act. Zachary thanked him and rode back to the ranch, stopping at several neighboring properties along the way to let them know what was happening. Most of the neighbors were sympathetic and promised to keep an eye out, though a few seemed nervous about getting involved with Hutchins. Over the next several days, nothing happened. Zachary began to hope that Hutchins had decided the land was not worth the trouble. But then, on a moonless night a week after the confrontation, someone cut the fence on the east pasture and stampeded their cattle. Zachary woke to the sound of hooves and shouting. He grabbed his rifle and ran outside to find Thomas already on the porch, having heard the noise. Stay with your mother and sister, Zachary ordered, then ran for his horse. It took him and 2 neighbors who had heard the commotion hours to gather the scattered cattle and get them back into the pasture. 3 head were missing, likely stolen, and 1 had broken its leg in the stampede and had to be put down. The fence was cut in 3 places, clearly deliberate, when Zachary finally made it back to the house at dawn. Exhausted and furious, he found Zara, Thomas, and Emma waiting on the porch. Zara had her rifle across her lap, and both children looked scared but determined. I am riding into town to get the sheriff, Zachary said. This was deliberate sabotage. Sheriff Porter came out to investigate and agreed that it looked like the work of Hutchins's men, but without witnesses or proof. There was little he could do beyond filing a report. He promised to increase patrols in the area, but Zachary knew that would not be enough. That night, he and Zara sat up late talking about their options. They could sell, take whatever Hutchins offered and start over somewhere else, or they could fight, knowing it would be difficult and possibly dangerous. "I will support whatever you decide," Zachary told Zara. "This was your husband's land before it was ours. If you want to sell and honor his memory differently, I will understand." Zara was quiet for a long time, then shook her head. "James would not want us to sell because we were scared. He would want us to fight for what is ours, and so do I." "Then we fight," Zachary said. They increased security on the ranch, taking turns staying up at night to watch for intruders. Zachary taught both Thomas and Zara how to fire warning shots, and they kept loaded rifles in both the house and the barn. The neighbors formed an informal watch, checking in on each other regularly and agreeing to come running if they saw any sign of trouble. 2 weeks later, Hutchins's men tried to poison the well. Zachary caught them in the act, firing warning shots that sent them running. He recognized one of the men, a ranch hand he had seen in town wearing Hutchins's brand. This time, he had a witness to take to the sheriff. Sheriff Porter arrested the ranch hand, who, faced with jail time, confessed that Hutchins had ordered him to make life difficult for the Atwoods until they agreed to sell. It was not enough evidence to arrest Hutchins himself. The hand claimed he had misunderstood his boss's intent, but it was enough for the sheriff to pay Hutchins a visit and make it clear that further harassment would result in legal consequences. After that, the attack stopped. Hutchins, realizing he had pushed too far and risked his own reputation and legal standing, backed off. He sent word through an intermediary that his offer to buy the land still stood, but there would be no more pressure. "We did it," Zara said when Zachary told her the news. "We stood our ground and we won." "We did it together," Zachary corrected, pulling her into his arms. "You, me, the children, our neighbors, everyone who refused to let a bully win." That night, they celebrated with a special supper, and Zachary made a point of praising Thomas's bravery in standing up to Hutchins that first day. "You showed real courage, son," he said. "Standing up for your family, for what you believe in. Your father would have been proud of you." Thomas beamed with pride, and Emma declared that she had been brave too by keeping watch with Mama while the men were chasing cattle. "You were all brave," Zachary said, "and I am proud of every one of you." As summer turned to fall, life settled back into a comfortable rhythm. The ranch continued to prosper, the cattle herd grew, and they began planning to expand their horse breeding operation. Zachary had discovered that Zara had a real gift for training horses, and several people in town had expressed interest in buying well-trained mounts. In October, Zara discovered she was pregnant. She told Zachary one evening after the children had gone to bed, her face a mixture of joy and nervousness. "I am going to have a baby," she said. "Our baby." Zachary felt his heart nearly burst with happiness. He swept her into his arms, spinning her around until she laughed and begged him to stop. "When?" he asked, setting her down carefully. "Spring, I think. April or May." They told the children the next morning at breakfast. Thomas looked thoughtful, processing this information while Emma was immediately excited. "Will it be a brother or a sister?" Emma asked. "We will not know until the baby is born," Zara said with a smile. "I hope it is a sister," Emma declared. "Then I will not be the only girl anymore." Thomas, who had been quiet, suddenly spoke up. "Does this mean you love us less now that you are going to have a baby that is really yours?" The question broke Zachary's heart. He knelt beside Thomas's chair and took the boy's hands in his. "Thomas, listen to me very carefully. You and Emma are really mine. Maybe I did not father you. Maybe I was not there when you were born, but you are my children in every way that matters. I chose you, and I choose you every single day. This new baby, whenever he or she arrives, will be your brother or sister. But it does not change how I feel about you. You understand." Thomas's eyes were shining with tears. "Promise." "I promise," Zachary said firmly. "I love you, Thomas, I love Emma, and I will love this new baby, but there is not a limited amount of love to go around. Love grows. The more people you have to love, the more love you have in your heart." Emma climbed into Zachary's lap and wrapped her arms around his neck. "I love you, Pa. I love you too, sweetheart." Thomas, not to be left out, joined the hug, and Zara wrapped her arms around all of them, and they stayed like that for a long moment. A family bound not just by blood but by choice and commitment and love. The pregnancy progressed smoothly through the winter. Zara continued to work on the ranch, though Zachary and even Thomas insisted on taking over the heavier tasks. She bloomed with the pregnancy, her face glowing with health and happiness. Christmas that year was special. It was their first as a married family, and Zachary was determined to make it memorable. He had been saving money, and he used some of it to buy gifts for everyone. For Thomas, a real cowboy saddle, smaller than an adult's but of good quality. For Emma, a beautiful doll with a china face and real hair, something she had admired in the store window for months. For Zara, a locket on a gold chain, with space inside for photographs of the children on Christmas morning. The children's delight was worth every penny he had spent. Thomas was speechless when he saw the saddle, running his hands over the leather with reverence. Emma clutched her doll and cried happy tears, and Zara, when she opened the locket, looked at Zachary with such love that he felt his own eyes sting. "It is beautiful," she whispered. "Not as beautiful as you," he said, kissing her softly. The children had made gifts too. Thomas had carved a small wooden horse for Zachary, spending weeks working on it in secret. Emma had helped Zara make a new quilt for their bed, her stitches uneven but done with love. Zara gave Zachary a new hat, to replace his battered old one, and a pocket watch that had belonged to her father. They spent the day together as a family, eating too much of the special Christmas dinner Zara had prepared, singing carols and telling stories. That evening, as they sat around the fireplace, Thomas said thoughtfully, "This is the best Christmas I can remember." "Even better than when Pa was alive?" Emma asked. Thomas considered this carefully. "Different," he said finally. "Not better or worse, just different. I miss our first Pa, and I always will, but I love our new Pa too, and I am happy now." Zachary felt a lump in his throat. He looked at Zara, who was smiling through tears. "Your first father will always be a part of this family," Zachary said. "We will make sure of that. We will tell stories about him, remember the good times, and teach your new brother or sister about the grandfather they never got to meet. Love does not have to be forgotten to make room for new love. They can exist side by side." "I like that," Emma said, snuggling against Zachary's side. Winter passed into early spring, and as Zara's pregnancy advanced, Zachary found himself becoming increasingly protective and nervous. He had never been through this before, never had to watch someone he loved go through the dangers of childbirth. He tried not to show his fear, but Zara knew. "Women have been having babies since the beginning of time," she told him one evening as he fussed over her. "I have done this twice before. I will be fine." "What if something goes wrong?" he asked quietly. She took his hand and placed it on her swollen belly, where he could feel the baby moving. "Then we will deal with it together. But I am healthy, and the doctor says everything looks good. You need to trust that this is going to be all right." On a warm day in late April, Zara's pains began. Zachary sent Thomas racing into town to fetch the doctor and the midwife, while he helped Zara into the house. Emma, who was frightened by her mother's obvious discomfort, clung to Zachary's leg until he gently pried her off and asked her to help by boiling water and gathering clean cloths. The labor was long, stretching through the afternoon and into the evening. Zachary stayed by Zara's side the entire time, holding her hand, wiping sweat from her face, offering what comfort he could. Thomas and Emma waited in the main room with Mrs. Patterson, who had come from town to watch over them. Finally, just as the sun was setting, the strong cry of a newborn baby filled the air. Zachary felt tears streaming down his face as the midwife cleaned the baby and placed it in Zara's arms. "A girl," the midwife announced with a smile. "A beautiful, healthy baby girl." Zara looked exhausted but radiantly happy as she gazed down at their daughter. "She is perfect." Zachary leaned over to see the tiny face, the small fists waving, the eyes squinting in the lamplight. His daughter. His and Zara's daughter. "What should we name her?" Zara asked. They had discussed names but had not settled on anything definite. Now, looking at this new life they had created together, Zachary knew exactly what her name should be. "Hope," he said. "Her name is Hope," Zara smiled. "Hope Atwood. It is perfect." They allowed Thomas and Emma to come in and meet their new sister. The children were awed and gentle, touching the baby's tiny hands with wonder. "She is so small," Emma whispered. "You were that small once," Zara told her with a tired smile. Thomas looked at Zachary. "Is she really ours?" "Really our family, really and truly," Zachary confirmed. "Your little sister." Over the next weeks, Hope became the center of the household. She was a good baby, sleeping and eating well, and everyone doted on her. Thomas was surprisingly gentle with her, holding her carefully and singing to her in a soft voice. Emma wanted to help with everything, from changing diapers to picking out which blanket to wrap her in. Zachary was completely smitten. He had not known it was possible to love someone so immediately and completely. Every time Hope wrapped her tiny fingers around his one large one, every time she looked at him with her unfocused newborn gaze, every time she made one of her small baby sounds, he fell more in love. "You are a natural father," Zara told him one night as she watched him walk the floor with Hope, rocking her gently to soothe her back to sleep. "I had good teachers," he said, nodding toward the rooms where Thomas and Emma slept. "Those two taught me everything I know about being a parent." As spring turned to summer, life continued its steady rhythm. The ranch was thriving, the cattle herd had increased, and Zachary had made several successful sales of trained horses. They were not wealthy by any means, but they were comfortable, with enough money to meet their needs and even save a little. One evening in July, as they all sat on the porch watching the sunset, Thomas turned to Zachary with a serious expression. "Pa, can I ask you something?" "Of course, son." "That day when Mr. Hutchins came and threatened us, and you promised you were not going to leave no matter what, did you ever think about breaking that promise? When things got hard and scary, did you ever think about just taking us away from here?" Zachary thought about the question carefully. It deserved an honest answer. "There were moments when I was scared," he admitted. "Moments when I worried about keeping you all safe. But no, I never thought about breaking my promise, because this is not just about land or a ranch. It is about family, about standing up for what is right, about teaching you that when you make a promise, especially to the people you love, you keep it. No matter what." "Even if it is hard?" Emma asked, Hope sleeping in her arms under careful supervision. "Especially when it is hard," Zachary said. "Anyone can keep a promise when it is easy, but the measure of a person is whether they keep their promises when it gets difficult." Zara reached over and took his hand, squeezing it gently. "Your pa kept every promise he ever made to us. When he said he was staying, he stayed. When he said he would protect us, he protected us. When he said he loved us, he showed it every single day through his actions. I want to be like that when I grow up, Thomas said quietly. You already are, son, Zachary told him. You have been keeping the promise you made to your first father to take care of your mama and your sister. That takes courage and commitment. Thomas looked pleased but thoughtful. It is easier now that I have you to help. That is what family is for, Zachary said. To help each other, to share the burdens, to make the hard things easier. As the sun set in a blaze of orange and gold, painting the Arkansas sky in brilliant colors, Zachary looked around at his family and felt a contentment so deep it almost hurt. This was everything he had been searching for all those years of drifting. Purpose, belonging, love. The years that followed were good ones. The ranch continued to grow and prosper. Thomas grew into a tall, strong young man, every inch the cowboy he had dreamed of becoming. He was serious and responsible, but Zachary made sure he also had time to be young, to go to town dances, to laugh and play with friends his own age. Emma remained bright and cheerful, growing into a lovely young woman with her mother's determination and her father's kindness. She had a gift for healing, tending to sick animals and even helping the town doctor on occasion. Hope grew from a baby into a toddler, then a little girl full of curiosity and energy. She had Zara's auburn hair and Zachary's hazel eyes, and a personality that was entirely her own. She was fearless and adventurous, always getting into mischief but impossible to stay angry with. When Hope was 3 years old, Zara got pregnant again. This time it was twins, 2 boys they named James after Zara's first husband and Zachary Jr., called Zach. The boys were identical, with dark hair and bright blue eyes, and they kept the entire household busy. The house had been expanded twice to accommodate the growing family, and the ranch now employed 2 other hands to help with the work. Zachary and Zara worked side by side every day, equal partners in every way, and their love for each other only deepened with time. On their 5th wedding anniversary, Zachary arranged for the children to spend the night with Mrs. Patterson in town so he and Zara could have an evening alone. He cooked dinner himself, something he had learned to do with reasonable competence over the years, and they ate by candlelight at the kitchen table. "Do you remember the day we met?" Zachary asked as they finished their meal. "I remember thinking you would leave within a week," Zara said with a smile. "You had that look about you, like someone who was not used to staying in one place." "I remember thinking you were the most beautiful woman I had ever seen," Zachary said, "even exhausted and weary and covered in dust. And I remember feeling like something had shifted inside me, like I had been wandering my whole life and suddenly found where I was supposed to be. Did you know then that you would fall in love with me? Not right away," he admitted, "but soon. Maybe that day we were moving cattle and you fell from your horse. When I held you and told you I loved you, it felt like the most natural thing in the world, like I had been waiting my whole life to say those words to you." Zara's eyes were shining with tears. "I was so scared to let myself love you, so scared of being hurt again, of losing someone else I loved. I know, but you were brave enough to take the risk, brave enough to open your heart again. You made it easy," she said softly. "You kept every promise you ever made. You loved my children like they were your own. You honored James's memory while building something new with me. You gave me everything I had lost and more than I ever dreamed of having." They made love that night with the tenderness and passion of long familiarity, knowing each other's bodies and hearts completely. Afterward, lying in bed with Zara in his arms, Zachary thought about the promise he had made all those years ago, standing in front of the children, telling them he would not leave. It had not always been easy. There had been hard times, scary times, moments when he questioned whether he was strong enough or good enough for this responsibility. But he had never, not once, regretted making that promise or working to keep it. When Thomas turned 18, he came to Zachary with a request. "I want to stay here and work the ranch with you. Make it bigger, better. Build something to pass on to James and Zach someday, the way Grandpa James wanted to build something for me." Zachary felt pride swell in his chest. "Nothing would make me happier, son. We will be partners, you and I." Equal partners. They shook hands on it, and Zachary saw the man Thomas had become. Strong, capable, honorable, everything a father could hope for in a son. Emma surprised everyone by announcing she wanted to study medicine. "I know it is unusual for a woman," she said nervously. "But I am good at healing and I want to learn more. I want to help people." "Then you should do it," Zachary said firmly. "Your mother and I will support you in whatever you want to do." They scraped together the money to send her to a women's medical college in the East, and though it broke their hearts to see her go, they were so proud of her courage and determination. Hope grew into a spirited young woman who loved the ranch and riding more than anything. She could rope and ride as well as any cowboy, and she had a way with horses that was almost magical. The twins, James and Zach, were constant companions, always getting into trouble together but loyal to each other and to the family. As the years passed, and Zachary's hair began to gray at the temples, he often found himself thinking about how different his life would have been if he had not stopped in Bentonville that day in 1878. If he had ridden through without stopping, or if Zara had turned him away, or if he had left when things got hard. But he had stopped. He had stayed. He had kept his promise. And because of that, he had a life richer and fuller than he had ever imagined possible. One evening, many years after that first meeting, Zachary sat on the porch with Thomas, now a man in his late 20s with a wife and child of his own. They were watching Hope work with a young horse in the corral, her movements sure and confident. "You ever regret it?" Thomas asked suddenly. "Giving up the drifting life to settle down here?" Zachary thought about the question, about the young man he had been, restless and searching. "Not for a single second," he said honestly. "That life was empty. I did not know it at the time, but I was lonely and lost. Your mother, you, Emma, all the children we had together, this ranch, this community, this is what gives life meaning. Not adventure or excitement or freedom from responsibility, but connection. Love, family, purpose. I am glad you stayed," Thomas said quietly. "I am glad you kept your promise." "So am I, son. So am I." As the sun set on another day, painting the Arkansas sky in shades of gold and crimson, Zachary looked around at the ranch they had built together. The house, expanded and improved over the years, stood solid and welcoming. The barn and outbuildings were in good repair. The cattle grazed peacefully in the distance. The garden, now tended by Hope and the twins, was lush with vegetables and flowers. But more than the physical accomplishments, Zachary saw the family they had created. Zara, still beautiful even with silver threads in her auburn hair, came out of the house carrying glasses of lemonade. Hope finished with the horse and came bounding up to the porch, full of excitement about the progress she was making. The twins ran around the corner of the house, chasing each other and laughing. This was his legacy. Not just the land or the cattle or the buildings, but the people. The love they shared, the promises kept, the lives intertwined and built on a foundation of commitment and trust. When Zara sat beside him and took his hand, their fingers intertwining with the ease of long practice, Zachary leaned over and kissed her temple. "I love you," he said, as he had said countless times over the years. "I love you too," she replied, as she always did. And in that simple exchange, in that promise renewed day after day, year after year, was everything that mattered. Zachary had promised he would not leave, and he had kept that promise. In front of the children, in front of the community, in front of God and Zara and his own heart, he had given his word and stood by it. It was not always the easiest path. There were still hard times, still challenges to face. But they faced them together as a family, bound by love and commitment and the promises they had made to each other. As darkness fell and the stars began to appear in the vast Arkansas sky, the family gathered on the porch together. Thomas and his wife and baby, Hope and the twins, Zara and Zachary. 3 generations, bound together by blood and choice and love. Someone suggested singing, and they raised their voices together in harmony, the sound carrying across the ranch and into the night. And Zachary, listening to the voices of his family, felt a peace and contentment that surpassed anything he had ever known. This was home. This was family. This was love. And he would spend the rest of his days grateful for the choice he had made to stay, to put down roots, to keep his promises. The cowboy had promised his wife he would not leave, and he had kept that promise in front of the children. Not just once, but every single day. Through hard times and good times, through challenges and triumphs, through ordinary days and extraordinary moments. He had stayed. He had loved. He had built a life worth living. And that, Zachary knew, was the greatest adventure of all.